Now, there have been several recent events and workshops around town dedicated to raising awareness about transgender citizens right here in our community. All this as advocates continue to lobby the city of Jacksonville to pass an updated Human Rights Ordinance that includes all of our citizens and is inclusive of gender identity and expression. So what does that mean, and why is that even controversial? Well, right now we're taking a closer look as we welcome Shavara Orton, founder of We Are Straight Allies here in Jacksonville, also a member of our board of directors. Shavara, good morning.
Good morning.
Gina Duncan is here. She's Transgender Inclusion Director with Equality Florida. Good morning.
Good morning.
Trisha Russell, Vice President with Bank of America, here today.
Good morning.
And Cam, a freelance writer and artist, joining us. Good morning.
Good morning.
And here's our question to callers. What are your questions about this topic as we discuss the stories of transgender residents and their experiences here on the First Coast? Give us a call with your thoughts, 549-2937. Shavar, let's begin with you. As I mentioned, our own Al Letson recently participated in an event about this topic as his show, State of the Reunion, explored the topic of trans families. You were involved in that event. That was I was not there, but it was a powerful, impactful evening by all accounts.
It was. WJCT and SunTrust Banks partnered with We Are Straight Allies to host a live listening session of State of the Reunion trans families. And actually, Cam and Trisha, who are both here with us today, served on that panel.
Yeah. And so, Trisha, let's talk to you about this for a minute. This was an opportunity for you to talk about your story, your experience. It's nothing we can, it would take all day, I guess, but in the limited time we have, tell us a little bit about your story and why you were chosen for inclusion into this program.
Well, thanks. So I was born in a very devoutly Catholic family. I'm 57 years old. So, I was growing up a half century ago in a very Catholic community and always saw myself as female. When my parents figured that out, realized that it wasn't a brief role play thing. Mm-hmm. They were very clear, that there was something wrong.
They didn't approve.
They did not approve. That what I was doing was unacceptable. And, I learned very early that I needed to hide that part of me. And that really ruled my life in a lot of ways for almost a half century. It took a long time for me to get to the place in my life where I said, I am okay, and this is who I am, and to be okay with myself.
It took decades.
It did.
What finally was sort of the catalyst for you to be open about who you are?
Well, it was two things, really. One, you can only bury who you really are for so long without experiencing a lot of difficulty, and I was at that place in my life. And then secondly, I became aware of people that I was close to who were open and accepting, including my employer.
Bank of America.
Right, yes. And so it made it easier to take the step in faith and say, this is who I am, and this is where I need to go.
Cam, you had a similar experience?
Yes. I grew up struggling with my gender identity, but not really having the language or the connection with myself to understand why that was. And when I started actually finding that language and finding that understanding of what was going on, it still took me a long time to accept it. So,
how come?
Because not having support in your life does make a huge impact. Feeling like you're in a place where you don't really have the option to do what it is that you need to do to really truly become and express yourself makes a huge impact. And when I started to understand this, I did not have supportive people immediately around me. And I shortly after that went overseas. And I was living in a developing country where it was not really an option for me to explore transitioning. So I did finally come out and start transitioning after I moved to Japan. And then I came back to the First Coast and coming back to kind of the community where I grew up, where there are a lot of people who knew me, my family's here. It really it's become an interesting experience and really exploring how my identity as, somebody who identifies as transmasculine and somebody who's a person of color and how those things kind of come together and how that affects my experience is something that I've been trying to share and really get other people to, be able to discuss openly.
Gina Duncan, people being open about their lives and their lived experiences is really important because there's still such a lack of understanding about this.
It's
Can you
huge.
talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, visibility is one of our greatest strengths in the fact that not until recently, the transgender community actually was pretty much criticized for being the silent T in the LGBT community. And in getting legislation passed and working on human rights ordinances, as we are here in Jacksonville, a lot of the holdup was because of the gender identity and expression piece of that human rights legislation.
In fact, isn't that a main reason why it failed by one vote? There was so much resistance to that language being included?
Correct.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because it's kind of a domino effect in the fact without visibility, there's not awareness. Without awareness, there's not education. And without education, there's not normalcy. So what we're seeing with more and more people being visible on a local level and also being visible on a national level, like Laverne Cox being on the cover of Time magazine and being nominated for an Emmy, and Janet Mock being very visible, Jazz Jennings in South Florida writing a book and being on Katie Couric. All of these people represent visibility for our community, which increases understanding.
We're talking about the stories of transgender Americans right now on the program. We'll go to your calls in a moment at 549-2937. Shavara Oren, you're the founder of We Are Straight Allies, supporting an inclusive human rights ordinance in Jacksonville, inclusive of gender identity and expression. It was put before the city council a couple years ago, failed by one vote. People that are pushing on behalf of this measure are going to try again. Yes?
They are. And one of the things that's very exciting in our community, through our campaign, we have actually shot 2 ads with 11 city council candidates who are running for office who absolutely, unequivocally support an inclusive human rights ordinance with gender identity and expression. And one of the things I think that a lot of people in the city don't know is that the transgender community faces overwhelming and disparate discrimination. At work, 90% report harassment, 47% have been fired, not hired, or denied a promotion, and 14% were unemployed in 2001. That's more than twice the national average.
Tricia, did you find that to be the case in your life? You said your employer, Bank of America, has been supportive. What about the other areas of your life?
Well, I didn't always work for Bank of America.
Right, right.
And, my experience has been one of obvious, deep discrimination.
Can you give me some examples?
Even growing up as a kid, you didn't see much or hear much about transgender. When you did, it was a story on the news or in the newspaper that cast it in a very freakish light. You saw stories of people who were found to be or suspected to be transgender and lost their jobs, and there was no law to protect them from that kind of treatment.
Why do you think we as a society are so freaked out by this? That if someone's born male or born female and they're just not comfortable with that and they know that they need to be something else, why as a society can we not roll with that more easily, do you think?
Well, in part it's that there are very few people who are transgender. It's a very, very small percentage of the population. Depending on, what studies you read, it might be 0.5%, something in that neighborhood. And so
it's a minority of a minority.
Exactly. And what we don't see, day in and day out, we don't understand. What we don't understand, we fear.
Gina.
Well, I agree with that in the fact that, it goes against our basic social mores of how we're raised. From the time you're born, we have these social constructs that have been created by society to to put society in certain categories. So you're either male or you're female, and the more we blend those lines and the more we blur those lines, the more uncomfortable people are. I think this started, we're 20 years behind the gay and lesbian community, because for the longest time, that was the issue with sexual orientation, in that people did not understand it until they got to know more and more gay people or lesbian people. And the same dynamic is happening with transgender people, and the fact normalcy, again, it's if you know someone, and so many people have a different image of the transgender community. They picture the flamboyant drag queen on riding in a pride parade, that kind of thing. Instead of someone who's transitioned and who is a professional at work, just trying to be their authentic selves and live a normal life.
Cam.
I absolutely agree with what's been said. The fact that gender identity is so integral to who people feel like as human beings and to how all societies run make it really difficult for people to kind of go against what's considered normal in that way. Even with different sexualities becoming accepted now, a lot of that still works within the concept of the gender binary, male and female. And people think, well, this is just what you are. Whatever it is that you're born with or whatever it is that you're called when you're born, that's just part of who you are. And for some people, it's just, one, either not correct, but two, also not always that straightforward. Gender works on a spectrum just like sexuality does.
Let's go to your calls now. Lauren on the north side. Hi, Lauren. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me. I just wanted to state that we actually have issues as well in the homosexual community, basically looking at transgender as being one of them and how that equates out in their sexuality once they transition. And I was wondering if your callers have anything to say to that, being that my best friend is transgender and actually now currently my ex. So how does that play a role in our homosexual community here on the First Coast, and how can we create kind of a better talking space and environment for that?
Thanks for that, Lauren. Shavara.
Well, I think one of the ways we create space for that is doing what we're doing now. We've been very intentional as We Are Straight Allies over the past several months and moving forward through early next spring, creating space to have this conversation. There was a wonderful article in the Florida Times-Union. As Melissa mentioned, we had the event at MOCA with WJCT and SunTrust Banks. We're also going to be screening Gun Hill Road in December. That will be a partnership with Jasmine and the University of North Florida LGBT Resource Center. I think it takes all of us in this community, particularly those of us who identify as straight, to stand up and really add voice and power so that there is not discrimination, so that we do create a more inclusive community, and most importantly, that we pass a fully inclusive Human Rights Ordinance next year.
Why is it, if you could explain that dynamic, why it's so important, why you're calling particularly on people who identify as straight to join what you're doing?
Sure. I think the best analogy, when we think about the other civil rights movements that have happened, the women's suffrage movement, the feminist movement, and the civil rights movement of the 1960s, it was imperative that those people who belonged to the group that were not marginalized, the group, in some instances, that was the group that was oppressing, but the group that held power, to be a part of the liberation of those people who are marginalized, who are struggling, and who are discriminated against still in our community.
Let's go to Pam in Lakewood now. Hey, Pam, thanks for holding. You're on the air. Good morning.
Hello?
Hey, Pam. You're on the air. Good morning.
Sorry. It's yes, my comments. First, I want to say that I am certainly in favor of inclusive policies here in Jacksonville. But my question or concern, I guess, is the idea that of promoting that we be comfortable with the bodies that we are born with. And I don't just mean this in the sense of gender. I mean this in the sense of I'm fat or my breasts are small. You know, the idea that we have to go through medical procedures to become the people that we feel that we are. I mean, if somebody had been born in a time when this wasn't capable through science, how would they be living their lives? Again, I want to say that I want to support, but I have these concerns about encouraging people to be accepting of the bodies that they have and just be whoever you are, but with the body you're born with. And I'll take my comments off the air.
All right, Pam, thanks for that. Tricia, can you respond to that?
Well, I understand where Pam is coming from, and at the same time, we are body and spirit, or body and mind, if you prefer, and they're both critically important. And the synchronization of mind and body is so critical. And so, if the opportunity is there, for various therapies, including I personally see benefit to that, and that's the path that I'm on.
Gina.
Well, and it's certainly not something that is a whimsical situation, in the fact that it's usually a lifelong struggle, and for many people, it ends in attempting to take their own lives. In our community, the suicide rate is around 41%, which is staggeringly high.
It's not as easy as people might think to just accept the body that you're born with.
Exactly.
For this population of people.
And usually it's a lifelong struggle that actually begins with the point of self-actualization, that I truly feel that I am gender dysphoric, if you will. And so there's a lot of steps on the way to surgery, in the fact that, number one, you have to receive at least 2 letters from licensed mental health therapists stating that you do have gender dysphoria. And then from there, there's a progression in reference to what surgeries you might want to do. Facial feminization surgery, breast augmentation or reduction, and then finally gender reassignment or gender affirmation surgery is involved. For a lot of people, this is restrictive because of cost. For some people, maybe they don't want to do all of the surgeries. For many transgender people, however, having the alignment of your body with your soul is the utmost importance of being truly happy and being an authentic person.
Cam.
As Gina said, the road to transitioning and going through hormone therapy and having surgery is not easy. It's a long road, it's expensive, and it's not fun. The thing is that not everybody feels that that's something that they actually need to do. Not everybody feels like they need to go on hormones or have surgery in order to address their dysphoria. Not everybody has dysphoria. And one of the issues is that there are still places that have policies requiring people to have surgeries in order for them to be able to change their documentation and things like that. So one of the things that we need are policies to protect people in their transitions, regardless of whatever's going to be best for them physically and mentally.
Shivara, you agree? You're nodding your head.
I do. I completely agree. It's very interesting. Recently, my partner, Laura Riggs, and I, and actually this is where we met Cam, we attended a transgender support group, and there was a lot of pain in that room, and people were coming, as Cam mentioned, from very varied places. And I don't think this is any different than any other community. The transgender community is not a monolithic group, like the Black community is not a homogenous monolithic group. And I think we have to create space, and we have to be accepting of that everybody is such an individual. And so this journey, as we saw and heard as we listened to people share their experiences, is very broad and vast. And Cam is right. We have got to have better protections in place, because some of the challenges that many of them spoke of, whether it was getting a driver's license or going to a restaurant and showing identification that didn't look like how they present now, there are lots of challenges around that. And it makes it really difficult, particularly in the world of work, for transgender people to find employment.
And that's an ongoing issue, although one, luckily, as you said, Tricia, your employer, Bank of America, as you've gone through along your path, they've been supportive. That's encouraging.
Absolutely. And we find increasingly that particularly many larger employers, they come to the conclusion that it's both the right thing to do, and it's also, there's a strong business case.
It's good for business.
Absolutely. The reality is we live in a diverse community, and we are most effective if we reflect the community we live in.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And my background is similar in the fact that I transitioned while at Wells Fargo. And I found out that I was the 17th person at Wells Fargo to transition on the job. So Wells Fargo was very adept at this, and they actually brought in a transgender or a transition SWAT team because I was the regional manager for the company, and orient and educate my managers. But at Equality Florida, we've also found, because we work on human rights ordinances all over the state, and we found that the momentum and the groundswell that has been so powerful has come from the business community, in the fact that businesses are creating platforms that are fully inclusive, embracing diversity. They want to score 100% on the Human Rights Campaign's Corporate Equality Index and be perceived as a company that is progressive and that is welcoming and can attract the best and the brightest. Mm-hmm. So those business partners have enabled us to leverage, if you will, elected officials, that it's not only good for the transitioning employee, but it's also good for business, and it's good for the economic development of the municipality.
And that's the case. I'm sure that will be made again when this comes up again. But very quickly, you wanted to mention a screening of a film, Gun Hill Road, at Sunray Cinema.
Right. We're planning to screen that the first week of December. We'll be providing more information. People will be able to receive more information on our website, www.wearestraightallies.com.
Well, thank you all so much for being with us. A really fascinating discussion. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Shavara Oren, Gina Duncan, Tricia Russell, Cam W., all with us today. And we are out of time. Thanks so much for listening. Diane Reams up next. I'm Melissa Ross, and this is First Coast Connect on 89.9 WJCT FM.